committed to a set of norms and to the fulfillment of a set of norms, which are at the same time structured by the very sort of polity whose condition of possibility is your exclusion from the capacity to claim those norms, right? And again, so that this is a specific instance or manifestation of this general condition of the neurotic, right? That I think Fanon is trying to talk about and to work through. And it shows up in this very, I think it has to do really with what I take to be already in black skin, white masks, how it is that Fanon is moving towards a sociological disruption of what we might think of as, let's say, something that shows up as a kind of normative political desire, recognizing that this normative political desire is also at the same time neurotic, right? That there's something unachievable about this, about the claims, and about there's something impossible about the aim. And I guess what I'm trying to say is it's this moment in Fanon where I think he's already moving in a kind of terrain or in a kind of direction that distances him from something that we see like in Hannah Arendt, right? A certain claim that Arendt will make on the political is already, by the time we get to black skin, white masks, something that Fanon is already calling, I think, beginning to call radically into question. And of course, this is maybe seems like a kind of a counterintuitive claim. I don't think it ever shows up in this way that, like, he doesn't make the sharp distinction between the political and the social that Arendt makes, which is precisely why Arendt's work becomes useful for reading this in Fanon, right? But what he does do, I think, is provide the foundations of a kind of deeper theoretical work precisely around that distinction, right? And about a revaluation of that distinction, which Arendt sort of doesn't get to. So she makes a certain kind of terminological maneuver which helps us to understand something in Fanon. But Fanon, without the terminological maneuver, is still thinking about it more deeply and getting into it in a much, not only thinking, and the reason why I say he's thinking about it more deeply, because I think he's correct in the way in which there is an implicit revalorization of that relation between the political and the social that you get in her work, right? Because for her, anyway, so the neurosis stuff is all bound up in that, and I just kind of sort of waved at it, but didn't really get into it, and that's what I was gonna try to get into. Supposedly that's what I was supposed to get into yesterday, but I never even got that far. And I'm bringing this up because I think there's certain stuff in the conclusion of the first section that's pointing toward this. So I'm kind of, so in a weird way, I'm trying to using what I was gonna say as a preface to what I actually am gonna get to say, so you'll know what it was, you know. And in the third section, it's called Like Sunny, which is a great Coltrane song, which is a kind of tribute to Sonny Rollins, okay? And I was thinking specifically about, and I mentioned, you know, we talked a little bit about this yesterday, that moment in the Q&A session of this brilliant talk that Professor Sexton does, where he talks about that relation between the intramural, you know, the intramurality of Sonny Rollins' band, right? Playing music which the PA system or the microphone breaks down so that the audience can't hear it. And how this, for him, provides a kind of a metaphor for understanding the relationship between the field of the intramural within, let's say, black sociality, the intramural being this term that Hortense Spillers deploys, and the field of whatever it is, the world that surrounds the intramural, or that looms over the intramural, right? And what I think and part of what he's arguing is that and this is the term he uses, is that inability to make the music heard, right? In the absence of the functioning PA system or microphone, what that inability marks is the absence of what he calls ontological reach. Okay. And in this respect, it's, I think, an extension of that famous formulation that Fanon makes in chapter 5 of Black Skin, White Mask, where he talks about, the sort of the impossibility, the interdiction of ontology, right, vis-a-vis the black, or the black man. Okay. So part of what I wanted to do, and like Sonny, was to consider and to continue to work through and to think about this absence of ontological reach as something that we might want actually to claim and to embrace, right? Okay. And I was going to try to do it by way of not only that music, but also in the beginning of that talk, Professor Sexton invokes this kind of amazing poem about David Walker written by Rita Dove. And I was going to try to see if I could work through and provide a reading, maybe an alternative kind of reading of that poem, which gets at the question of, well, one way to think about it is it raises again that question that I was already sort of mentioning last time. Let's say the question regarding the view or the point of view or the standpoint of the pathologist. Okay. Anyway, so these are the things that I was going to try to get to. And so some of what I'm trying to talk about today kind of gestures in that, or tries to move slightly in that direction. So I'm hoping that it will, that just in giving those little prefatory remarks, at least somehow this stuff will begin to make a little bit more sense, just in the sense of, just because you'll have some sense of what it was trying to get to or leading towards in some way. So anyway, I'm just gonna, I only really have about 11 pages to read. So I'll read it slow and make it seem like it's long. I don't, but I'm totally happy to spend the rest of the time, talking about the stuff. And I know people maybe had questions over the last 2 days that they hadn't gotten quite formulated yet. So I'm happy to answer, or address those questions. And also, you can just listen to some music or recite some poetry or whatever y'all want to do. Okay. All right. So this is the last paragraph that I read last night. Consider the constraint of black poetry, of fantasy in the hold or over the side. If it's a constraint, how is it a constraint? It is, first of all, a conceptual field, as Spillers would allow, a field in which more precisely the concept of the object is a kind of imperative at the level of both study and performance, in zones where neither the presumption nor the disavowal of self, each in their own obsessive self-regard, are the limits of poetic possibility, which is itself animated by both lyric and lysis, continually driven towards new fields of exhaustion. We have to continually work where aridity is only insofar as it is inseparable from hyperhydration, where thirst and submergence converge in the hold on the open sea, through this interplay of the establishment and the breakdown of the cell, if we are ever to attend the birth of an insurgency that Fanon prophesies and enacts.